Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Chris Kneeland on the line. Chris, how are you?
I am fantastic, Michael. Thank you for asking.
Oh, I'm happy to have you on the show today. You've got an amazing background. We've done a lot of work with some well-known organizations, but why don't you share a little bit about you and some of the work you've done?
Sure. So I consider myself a bit of an entrepreneur. I'm a provoker of thoughts and a builder of brands. I'm a big advocate of brand advocacy. I believe that most businesses have spent way too much time and energy and money trying to be famous, and not nearly enough time and energy trying to be adored and loved and craved and found irresistible. I, about 5 years ago, started spending a disproportionate amount of my time on internal engagement. First 20 years of my career was much more about getting audiences externally to kind of fall in love with your brand. And there's just been a massive shift in how brands are built from sort of the inside out. And I wouldn't even say a shift, just a massive recognition that when you start to look at the difference between great brands and mediocre brands, one of the glaring differences is their prioritization on their culture, and not just via lip service, but through real leadership and real investment. And so, I have an advisory firm, we have an event, we have a talent platform, have our fingers in a few different things, but it's all around the idea of helping professionals build better careers and companies build better engagement with key audiences.
And that's critical because with social media and access to information unlike we've ever had before in life, it's easy to be found, but it's also really difficult because just there's so much out there. So focusing on the brand, I love how you say from the inside out is really crucial, because when you do engage with your customers, whomever they may be, it's more genuine from my observation. It's because if you've done the work internally and you know who you are and you know your why, you know your what, and you know what the organization is about and what they want to do, I think that goes a long way in basically creating that old school know, like, and trust factor. It's like, okay, I feel that this is an organization that relates to me as a consumer or a customer, and I want to be able to support them by buying their products or services.
Yeah, and I don't even know. I take issue with two things that you said. Certainly, there's no dispute that the rise of social media and transparency has had an effect, and it's also, I do think there are some customers who want to more overtly align their personal values with brand values. But those aren't, in my experience, those aren't the big drivers of this. The biggest driver of this is excessive parity and choice in the marketplace. In first world countries, we are over-serviced. We have 19 ranch dressings on the store aisle. We have 27 business vendors that can provide any service with no meaningful differentiation between them. We have too many entrepreneurs that have decided to start businesses that aren't really required or are meaningfully different. They're just marginally different. And so we've created an environment where the buyer has no perceived way of making a discernible difference. How are they going to choose? And if they can't decide what makes a business different, they'll always go to price or convenience. So they'll only choose the cheapest or the easiest to access. So unless you are a brand that wants to play in that space, and very few are, because very few want to go toe-to-toe with Walmart or Costco or Amazon or Southwest Airlines, right? There's always going to be one really great low-cost provider. Everybody else, the vast majority, then have to find some other way to compete besides being the cheapest or the easiest. And that's why I think brand purpose and brand engagement has started to become important, is people have started to say, well, what if we stood for something different than just the products or services that we sold? What if we gave our customers something else besides what's inside the box some sense of belonging, some sense of community, some sense of education, some sense of entertainment. There's lots of other choices, but we've kind of gotten ourselves into this mess because we just keep propagating more and more stuff, despite the fact that consumers don't need more choice. They need more confidence in the.
I love that. It's in the grocery store analogy of all the ranch dressings and all that, even with supply chain challenges that we're currently facing. Okay, so there's 16 brands instead of 19. Okay, but it's still overwhelming to a lot of people, especially when you talk to new immigrants, for example, that go into a U.S. grocery store for the first time. They're just blown away. They're overwhelmed by how can you have this many types of the same thing? It's something that we've created obviously over the years, and nothing against those companies that have created it. They're obviously creating a margin and a product or a service, but like you said, they're not being completely different compared to everything else. And having something stand out with your organization, I think, is some of the great work that you've done with the companies that you've worked with. So let's share, you can share clients if you want. If not, just share some of the commonalities you find in those organizations that were able to stand out amongst all the others.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, because that is at the core of business 11 years ago. We began a research study initially for a book about what was the separation, what were the differences in beliefs and in behaviors between the world's most adored, what we call cult-like brands. Cult brands, I appreciate, can be a bit controversial, but just suspend your disbelief for this podcast and trust me when I say they're wildly attractive and desirable. So we were looking at these cult brands defined by businesses that were achieving above average success financially, but also above average engagement and emotional buy-in. We like to say these brands got people to not only buy, but to buy in. So you look at somebody like the Dallas Cowboys that was, not that great on the field, frankly, for the past couple of years, but head and shoulders above every other NFL franchise. How did that happen? Look at somebody like Porsche. Look at somebody like Costco. Costco not even spending any money on traditional advertising. And yet there's these people that just loved their experience of going to Costco and the treasure hunt that ensued. Lululemon. So we found dozens. Harley Davidson, some of the obvious ones, Apple, Nike, Starbucks, and then some of the less obvious ones like Lush Cosmetics or even the Saskatchewan Rough Riders here in Canada. And so we started to dissect them. We started to investigate their beliefs and their behaviors. And we found 8 things. 8, we call them now the cult brand principles. And that's what we wrote about in our book. And then what I really like about what we've done, Michael, is we didn't just stop. Every year, we continue to stress test it. Are those principles still true? Are there examples, today? Sometimes you see this research like Jim Collins is good to great, and people like to say, look at how the benchmark companies he used 20 years ago are now, GE is no longer a Wall Street darling, as an example. So every year, we would interview and investigate, and we'd find new brands like Reddit or Call of Duty or Airbnb. And these brands are, TikTok. TikTok wasn't even around 5 years ago. Now they're the fastest brand to get to 1 billion users. They're changing the media landscape, not just the social media landscape, but they're the first viable competitor to YouTube or television that we've ever seen. And we're curious, how does that adoption happen? What's going on inside their boardrooms? What decisions are they making? And these 8 principles continue to stay true. And some of them have become extremely popular, like brand purpose. Simon Sinek has made a nice living teaching us about this idea of starting with your why. But that principle has been inside cult brands for well over 100 years. We have evidence of that going back to John Deere in the 1800s, or even we just honored the NFL at our big event. So every year, instead of writing a new book, we just go to an event and we kind of have like the Oscars, if you will, but for businesses. And it's a chance to just remind people of the power of these principles, and then hopefully encourage them to start to apply them to their own businesses.
And that's what's so important is I think a lot of smaller businesses or startups, my audience is made up of a lot of people like that. Many times they think, okay, I can't do what John Deere did, or I can't do what Best Buy did, or the NFL. And actually they can. You scale it accordingly, but understanding and following those 8 things that you saw, I'm guessing can be applicable to pretty much any organization as long as they follow the guidelines and the playbook, using an NFL analogy, of rolling these things out.
Yeah, I get really disappointed when I hear a business leader use the word can't. They need to replace it with won't, because they can do anything. I remember a few years ago at the gathering, Tim Hortons spoke, and they put a picture up of their very first mom and pa donut shop. And it was no different than any other cruddy mom and pop donut shop that every town has a few dozen of. And it was like, what was the difference? Was Tim Hortons somehow have some superpower, some genetic, defect that caused their DNA to create, the most beloved brand in Canada? No, it was courage and creativity. And if you're not inspired by the origin stories of these massive brands, then you just lack courage or creativity, because every business started as an idea. Every business started in somebody's garage. And the only difference between the great brands and the mediocre brands is the ambition and the conviction of the leaders to not just settle for, mediocre. They wanted to be exceptional, and they wouldn't stop until they did.
And that's the common thing that I see in a lot of successful businesses, whether they're large or they're small, under a few $1 million of revenue, is what does the owner, what does the group want out of it? They want to just go and do something and create something and be good with that. Okay, that's fine. Don't anticipate that you're going to grow exponentially with that type of drive. But if you're one that says, no, I want to make a dent in the universe, there's a reason why I'm doing this, because we all have choices. And I love what you said a moment ago about eliminating can't from the vocabulary and replacing it with won't. And that's really what it boils down to. And a lot of people will say, I can't do that. It's like, no, you won't do what it takes in order for you to do that. And it's a mindset thing. And sometimes our programming, the language that we use internally in between our ears can be our biggest hurdle to overcome, especially when we're trying to grow our business to the next level.
Yeah, and I get discouraged by these false constraints and paradigms that people say, because they think that they have to somehow sacrifice profit or immediate, urgent success. They talk about the bills they have to pay or the mortgage they have to do. They don't understand that building a cult brand is a twofer. You get a super successful company and an environment in which you're personally fulfilled and rewarded. You don't have to go to your job and despise it and slave away at it, so you then can go home and scratch your itch for social good or philanthropy or some form of giving back. Why aren't we aligning those better? Why aren't we making our companies or our careers the place that we're becoming our best selves? And that way you get that exponential effect or that synergistic effect of 1 + 1 equals 3. And I think that too many people, and that's really what we're seeing. I mean, candidly, that is the great resignation that everybody talks about is oftentimes relabeled as the Great Awakening, or even the Great Discontent, where people are saying, enough of this. If something so small that we can't even see it is going to kill millions of people in a 2-year span, then maybe we better get on with our lives and start living. Maybe we better start doing the things that we've always said we were going to do but never did. And that's why people are saying, no more. I'm not going to work for this jerk. I'm not going to work for this company that doesn't align with my ideals. I'm not going to endure this commute or go into this office anymore. And I'm really inspired by it. There's a little bit of better late than never, but I'm sad that it takes a pandemic to get us to wake up and to start living our best lives.
I agree with you on that. And yeah, definitely great awakening, great reset. There's all kinds of ways to put it, but I too agree with what you say, because life is short. Life can feel long, but life is short. And when everything that has transpired over these last couple of years, people, and I agree with you as well on the, boy, this took long enough, but too bad it didn't need to cost, millions of lives to wake people up. But sometimes tragedy creates opportunity, and for people to make decisions on what they want to do, what's important to them. And I think organizations, the ones that are successful, will recognize that and say, okay, well, let's come to a common ground area where everything can work out for everybody. And there's going to be organizations that are going to be a mixture of in-person, hybrid, fully remote, and some organizations think that, no, we need to be fully in person, and their staff's going, why? We've been remote for 2 years and everything's been getting done, and we found efficiencies, and our work life is a bit better harmonized than it used to be before. Why do we need to go back to what really wasn't working? And those organizations, I think, are going to have a difficult time in the short term anyway, to be able to not only create great products and services, because their employees aren't going to be overly happy about the situation, to who knows what will happen with some of them. We've seen it in history, and you know that. You mentioned General Electric a few moments ago. There's, I forget what the stats are, but in the 1960s, the Fortune 500, there's only like 50 or 60 of those companies left. These are the top 500 companies in the world, and almost all of them are gone now. And so it's, don't rest on your laurels. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think that I wish the conversation was shifted. I think there's way too many calories being spent on the debate on where are employees physically doing their work, and are we making them come back to an office or not? And I wish that we had two very different conversations. One conversation around how do we enable and encourage maximum flexibility for employees that are trying to maximize their lives, and because that may be in the office or not, but it also might mean, am I working at 10 p.m. or 10 a.m.? It might mean, do I want to work 4 days a week, 12 hours a day, or 6 days a week, 6 hours a day, right? For most of us, we're not, well, I shouldn't say most. There's a huge swath of the population that doesn't have any control over their schedule. They're in the service sector. They have to be at our restaurants or at our hotels or at our airports, kind of a thing. But for white collar, knowledge-based workers, we should stop talking about where are they getting the work done and more about how are we enabling maximum flexibility. And then similarly, it's the leadership. I mean, most people that are clamoring for a return to the way things were is a return to how they were familiar with leading others and oftentimes micromanaging others. It's not all negative. Sometimes there's enhancements to culture and camaraderie that is important face to face. But I'm discouraged that when pressed, and when they're honestly pressed, there's a huge insecurity amongst the C-suite about, well, how are they going to retain this command and control mentality that they've only ever known if their people are, running around with not a lot of supervision. And that's where I think we have to shift the focus of maybe leadership isn't about command and control. Maybe leadership is about inspiration and empathy and empowerment. And that requires new types of leadership skills that not everybody is very strong in. And that's why I think that if you read in between the lines at a lot of these organizations, that's really what they're complaining about, is I'm going to lose a sense of my superiority. I'm going to lose a sense of my status if there's not, if we're not back to the old cubicle and corner office construct.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a shift from being a leader to being a coach. A coach wants their player to be successful. Here's some plays. Here's everything you need to do in order to be successful. Make sure they have everything that they need to be successful in the work that they're doing, and then let them do it. And I find that the organizations that allow for a lot of autonomy to, here's your job, here's the tools you have, what do you need from us? Let me know what you need, and then get out of their way. Let them do it and be there. Cheer them on when they do great things, correct them privately if they mess up, and just let them do great work. And I agree with you. I think there was a lot of it is self-confidence, I think, and egos and a lot of other things with some of the leaders that have this feeling of, I need to be the boss. And well, okay, great. Good for you. That's not making anything any better for anybody else by doing that. It certainly wasn't working for your employees before. They just had an out over the last couple of years, and now they're like, I don't want to go back in. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch, and I love how you've highlighted the leadership side of things on this, because again, those strong leaders that know how to lead properly, that will create the scenarios and the environments for growth and health of an organization, has a positive ripple effect in everything they do and all the deliverables they give to their customers, the brand awareness, you name it. It starts with strong leadership. And when you have that, then you're setting yourself up for success for sure.
Yeah. And I'm so fascinated by the coach metaphor. Because if I tell somebody on the street, think of a coach, the problem is there's a lot. You have high school coaches that are they have to make the best of whatever they're dealt with because they're dealing with, a huge swath of talent, and they don't get to cut many people. You could have an individual coach, like a tennis coach or a swimming coach. You could have a team coach. I tend to think about NCAA football, which is probably my favorite sports league, which is, then you start to look at, well, what makes them really successful? Is it their play calling? Is it their knowledge of the game? Is it how they manage the media or deal with upper management? The real discernment between a good coach and a great coach at the college ranks and a little bit at the NFL or professional ranks has to do more with recruitment and how much energy they put in getting the right people on the bus to begin with. So it's easy to kind of say everything you said about, give them the right tools and then get out of their way if they're the right kind of person. If they're not the right kind of person, that's going to lead to disaster. And then that's where we then say, well, let's revert back to systems that allow us to accommodate mediocre people or, cater to the underperformer, which is what corporate environments have historically done, versus the best leaders spend an irresponsible amount of time not running the business, but in attracting and retaining talent and in sourcing the next people that are going to run that organization. And I don't think that people view, they outsource that to HR, they outsource that to recruitment. Maybe the boss comes in on a final interview versus like, what if a boss spent 3 nights a week having dinners with people that they may not even be hiring for the next 6 or 12 months, but they're in a perpetual state of sourcing talent, because it's only after you find the right type of person can you then give them the tools and set them free and allow them to go and to be great. And I think we've just kind of phoned it in for too many years and treated too many people like commodities as opposed to cherishing and identifying. Reed Hastings with Netflix, and it's kind of a weird example because Netflix is imploding this week. But this week aside, there's no debate what Netflix has done, and he's written one of the best books on talent management and culture. And it's a whole philosophy that I think would be the exact opposite of how 90% of organizations today are operating and thinking about talent and culture. And yet Netflix has gone on to become this unicorn, and most businesses are floundering.
Yeah, the Netflix story, again, excluding this particular week, has been one of amazement from taking on Blockbuster many, many years ago, and everybody laughed them off. And Blockbuster could have, bought Netflix. There was an opportunity for them to do that, and they went, "No, we're not going to do that." And we know what happened with them. And it's a case of focusing on your people. They're not an order of paper clips or Post-it notes or a desk. They're living, breathing human beings with emotions, feelings, dreams, desires, you name it. And when you focus on their well-being and checking in with them in a human, not standard scheduled template kind of thing, but in a realistic, understanding where your people are and what they need and how things are going for them, especially during this pandemic, this pandemic has been hard on everyone in a variety of different ways, but continually checking in with people and seeing, how are they, what's going on, is there anything that we can do to help anything that you're facing right now? Just doing something like that is critical for retention. They're going to remember that. They're going to think long and hard about leaving the organization if that's the type of environment that you have. Someone that is really genuinely caring about the individual and what they're doing. So I've loved this conversation, Chris. Where can people find out more about you and this amazing work you do?
Thanks. So my agency is called Cult. Our website is cultideas.com. We have loads of free content, daily thought leadership, scorecards, a book, the event, lots of ways that we really feel that our job is to evangelize a new and better way to think about leadership and about brand building. So they could certainly go there, and they can follow me personally just to reach out on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on that community trying to spread the good word.
Awesome. And I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So Chris, again, thank you so much for this conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and continued success in everything you do.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. I really appreciate meeting you.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.